workloads. That's the whole idea. Now, the challenge that we see is if we have to take care of security, and traditionally what we were doing was we used to take care of security in a specific manner. Say, for example, if I have an application sitting in my data center, I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different things protecting my application sitting in my data center. Now, what is happening is the same application or the same types of workloads are moving into different directions, right? How do I then extend the same level of security across? And I think that's the most important thing. We need to make sure that we have the same consistent security experience. Why? Because security, people talk about 3 things. It's people, process, and technology, right? If I build silos today, silos, why? Because if I have to take care of my security in my data center, I need to have certain skill sets, certain processes. If I need to take care of security in my cloud environment, I need to have certain skill sets and processes. We are creating more problems for ourselves. The only way to do it, or the best way to do it rather, is where we have consistent security experience, right? Irrespective of where our workloads reside. The second thing as a company, as Palo knows what you're doing, is making sure that we live up with the pace of innovation, which basically is what is called as innovator's dilemma. And why do I say so? It's mainly because the sort of threats that we see today, the sort of new threats that we see today, it's impossible for one vendor, and we acknowledge that. I come from Palo Alto Networks, and I say this on stage, saying it's impossible for any one person to actually take care of all your security needs. It's impossible. And that is where the need is to make sure that we work with ecosystem partners. We work with multiple different OEMs, vendors, partners, to make sure that we can solve this problem of security, right? Wherein consumption of security becomes much more easier and faster. Why? Because we cannot look at more than 3 or 4 technologies in a specific year. We all consume security, and if I have to take a security decision, right, I cannot look at more than 4 or 5 different technologies in a specific manner, because we're limited by budgets, we're limited by time, and we are limited by resources. That is the reason why it's all about having a new consumption model, and that's what I spoke about in my keynote. It's all about creating a model where I can consume security at the click of a button, right? And we move, and the whole idea is detection and response needs to move everywhere. It's the vision that we have is detection and response anywhere. Your data could be on the endpoint, it could be on cloud, it could be in SaaS, it could be anywhere. I think what we as a company are moving into is more about detection and response anywhere detection and response. So we need to have the right capabilities in place to make sure we can take care of that.
So to a great extent, the OEMs define the market. Okay. I think the time is now reaching where the security professionals, the business is also taking a call to say what type of risk we can do, rather than just be waiting for the OEMs to say what we should be doing it. The OEMs also, if you look at the network layer, they started with the firewall, then they added IPS, UTM, they bought in the proxies to that thing. Literally they were converging a lot of technologies together, and majority of the investment was going at that space. Now suddenly the discussion is going in such a manner saying there is a weakness in that, because can we see really? From Ganesh, from your point of view, how do you perceive this risk, or do you consider this as a risk which we need to address it in a separate manner? Because when I come back to Riyaz, he will have a roadmap to say this is how I'm going to address it. But currently, what's your view?
Yeah, I think it is pretty interesting, as you said, Sunil. There were problems or business cases where we said firewalls, we had proxies, you have web sensors and everything. But in spite of all these things, we are seeing numerous attacks. So those attacks made to feel as that we have a security risk. The very important aspect is bigger industries and corporations. They have this huge IT infrastructure. They never know where their data resides. And nowadays, the perimeter is completely become invisible, right? That is the major thing. So previously we are focusing on securing our data center. Now the focus is more on securing endpoints, right? So what I see from these kind of an evolution is we need to understand where are our critical assets. And there was a methodology where they said that wherever is your precious element or data, you corner and put a multi-layer security on top of it. You add more and more layers, right? Now, even they are saying that no, even if you add multiple layers, I'm not sure whether you will be able to still achieve the business requirement. So the security is always at a risk going to a cloud. So I'm just bringing in cloud. right? And data being accessible from any place, encryption technologies are becoming so vibrant and people are able to crack it, so which is more scary. So the security risk from a data perspective is always there, and in spite of all these defenses, whatever we provide, as Riyaz was also complimenting, right? There is no single fit for all the solution, right? So that's my initial thought when we talk about the security risk angle.
So, Alok, if how do you position the Netskope in the entire perspective which we are talking about? And also for the sake of audience, can you give a small brief what Netskope at a higher level look at?
Sure. So, Netskope is a cloud security provider. It's a software as a service or security as a service. Gartner recently came out with Magic Quadrant, not recently, about a year ago, and we are the most visionary and the leader in that space. Having said that, I'll keep Netskope aside and talk about the topic. I think time has come to look at security extremely differently. I think we grew up, the approach to security in general over last 20-25 years has always been bottoms up. When I say bottoms up, essentially what we've been doing in the enterprise networks is no matter where the user is, where my branch is, I always bring the data back to the data center and VPNs, right? All kinds of VPNs from site to site to IPsec to SSL VPN. But fundamental assumption I have made in building my enterprise network until about 5 years ago has been tunnel all the traffic to the data center. What I do in the data center, right behind the firewall, I put all kinds of security filters, if you will, IPS, IDS, deep packet inspection, DLP, what have you. And then out comes the clean traffic. That has been my view and general construct about looking at security. And look at what's happening to the users on the other hand. Users are carrying, so users operate today on, when I'm saying users operate, I mean the enterprise work is being carried out on two sets of devices. A managed device, which is an enterprise device, and an unmanaged device, which is my own device through which I do a lot of work. There has been huge virtualization of all kinds of things over the last few years. There is virtualization of data center. Several of us talked about that. There is virtualization or distribution of data itself. Data does not reside in the data center anymore. It is in the cloud applications, right? So if I use Salesforce or if I use Office 365, suddenly my enterprise data now is no longer sitting in my Exchange server or applications, SAP-like application that I used to have in my data center. It's sitting in those clouds in my instance. My devices are distributed like we discussed. So there is distribution all across the place. A centralized security approach is impossible to work, right? So fundamentally, when we were looking at this problem about 5 years ago, we said today's network, the VPN-driven network, right, which is everything is at the data center boundary, and I have all kinds of monitoring, security, manageability at the network, at the perimeter of the network. And in that scenario, if you look at, if I, the common case of using a cloud application from my mobile, and if you look at how that traffic flows, that traffic is not even hitting the perimeter of my network, right? So far I was used to tunneling all the traffic to the data center, and suddenly all these cloud applications came, the mobile devices came. I don't get the traffic in my data center. I don't even have a view of the traffic. How do I secure a traffic that I don't even see? And that's what we started to solve the problem. And essentially, I think, in our view, where the world is moving is, as enterprises gets more and more comfortable about moving applications to the cloud, security usually is a laggard. Nobody wants to change security. Security is a complicated matter, right? Any changes to security, IT departments within the company are extremely careful. But as the applications move out, that hindrance or inhibition to move security out of my data center into the cloud will go away as well. Today I'm compelled to provide security for this traffic, the cloud and the mobile traffic that I do not see in my data center. I'm compelled to provide security for that. That's called CASB today, Cloud Access Service Broker. That's what we do for a living. But I think over the next few years, the way the world will evolve is security will be, we talked about one single platform, one single policy framework. and applying security wherever the data is, wherever the user is, wherever the endpoint is, and that is possible only if security is truly delivered from the cloud, right? So that.
Now, Alok, from everybody's thing, what I understand now is, we don't know where the data is, we don't know who is accessing it, from where they are accessing, which device they are accessing. We cannot have a centralized function. We don't have enough budget if you actually look at, because people are not available. And the technology at the few years back, the network guys all consolidated everything to a central position. Now we are saying that is disrupted. So, are we at a serious risk in the transition? So that's something which I think we collectively need to think about, how we are addressing. Now coming back to you again, I understand that normally a technology companies will say, okay, this is an endpoint, then I move to the network layer, then I move to cloud, that's how they grow. I heard that you are now moving to endpoint and starting taking revenue out from there. So is it purely because of to improve your balance sheet better, or what is the rationale of coming as an antivirus company also?
Right. Let me again, traditionally speaking, people know of Palo Alto Networks as a next generation firewall company, right? People generally talk
That's how
about
we believe.
Yeah.
But suddenly
Right.
we are saying that you are an antivirus company.
But again, I wouldn't want to call myself an antivirus company again. Right? On a lighter
Security
note.
company, we'll
Okay, but the whole thing is, again, we are a company which are more focused on threat prevention. How do we prevent threats of any types that we see in the industry today? Now the reason why we started with endpoints, and we actually started with endpoints a couple of years back. It's not that we started today. It's been a journey. And it's again goes back to the whole point that if you see traditionally where antivirus, or you can say the endpoint as an industry started, and the main focus was antivirus. Why? Because, and that industry evolved with things like, for example, hash-based techniques, right? We use hash-based techniques to identify threats and all that. But I don't want to get into more deeper into technology of how it's done, why it's done, and all those different things. I'll give a very basic example. We all know WannaCry, and I am sure everybody in this room has probably read minimum 100 pages on WannaCry. We all know about it, right? Because that was a big talked about topic when it happened. Now, I'll give a very basic example. Why did WannaCry happen? WannaCry happened because somebody, or you can say double pulsar, which was used, I'm sure people have read about it. Double pulsar was the malware which was delivered using an exploit called as Eternal Blue, which actually took advantage of a vulnerability in a protocol called SMB, because of which that whole fiasco happened. What I want to say here is, malware delivery is the result of a successful exploit. It's exploits that lead to malware delivery, right? Now, unfortunately, it is very difficult to identify exploits at the network level. Very difficult, right? IPSs generally they are supposed to be looking at, exploits at the network level, but they only look at network traffic. There are many things which happen at the operating system level. There are many things that happen at the kernel level. There are so many different complications at the endpoint, right? So to identify the most sophisticated type of threats, it is important to have controls at the endpoint, which is more to do with looking beyond just the antivirus as a system, because it's only looking at one aspect of it. And even malwares, right? I personally believe that sandboxing as a technique has become a commodity right now, right? Everybody does that, and the reason I say that is because if you see, based on a very recent report which I saw, there in 2018, the types of threats that we see, there has been an increase of 35% in fileless attacks. Fileless attacks why? Because we don't see any type of file. Why do we see that is mainly because sandboxing, what does it do? There's a type of file, maybe a PDF or an MS Office file. We put that into a sandbox. Sandbox will do its magic and tell you whether it's good or bad. The bad guys identified that, people have come up with techniques to identify file-based attacks. Let's move on to more of something called as fileless. Let's look at injection techniques and all those different things. So we, being a security company, we identified that if we have to prevent threats, right, and we see the emergence of things like fileless attacks and all that, we have to start looking at endpoint. That's how we evolved into this endpoint space.
At least in the security community, when we say it, we should also acknowledge that it is the problem of WannaCry happened because they created a malware.
Yeah.
It actually happened because we didn't patch.
But that's the harsh
So
reality.
we should, at least in our community, when we go to our boss or a board, we can talk in the other manner because they created a malware, and that because of that. But we have technology here, we did not do our job. Okay, but I agree to this thing. I spoke to many other companies on why they are getting from network layer to endpoint security. They also gave a similar view, saying that one was that the encryption traffic is so much happening, due to which they don't get a visibility at network layer. And without adequate visibility, they cannot have a holistic view of the threat, including cloud, everything. So it has become extremely essential to come down to endpoint and collect before the encryption happens. That's one side I heard. But I strongly believe the antivirus market is a $3.4 billion market, controlled by 3 parties. And there is a lot of money there. So that could be also one of the reasons. But most of the companies, if you look at Palo Alto is a pioneer, Checkpoint, Cisco, everybody is trying to get into the market. It's good. From Ganesh, from your view, when this entire disruption is happening, so mainly is that 3 years back when I was designing a security solution, we had data at the center. And there is a user who is sitting at the next layer accessing data. Now the new direction what we are signing is saying data is sitting somewhere. And the user is, I don't know where he is. Okay, I don't know which device he is accessing from. So in this aspect, is the way you look at risk has changed. Because especially when you go for an audit or when you are reviewing it, earlier we looked at the network and said, do I have a firewall? What type of rule goes in? Now, the threat perspective is different.
Yeah.
Okay, how does it change?
So I think, as you said, the perimeter is kind of completely vanished. So people are anywhere in the world, and the cloud is anywhere, and still they want access. So from a traditional risk management perspective, what we need to do is we need to understand what we are putting in the cloud. Right now, if you say most of the businesses are in cloud, even core banking solutions are in cloud actually, so which is even more riskier. But the due diligence part is very important, what I want to bring in. And again, cloud market is also kind of a monopoly, as Sunil was saying, for the antivirus market. You have 3 or 4 top guys. And again, there is also a lot of consensus and standards and controls built around cloud. Cloud Security Alliance is one of them. Most of the big cloud vendors are compliant to it. And again, you can enforce cloud vendors, even they say cloud, I can still define a geographic boundary, and I can still define whether I want a private cloud. Even we say a lot of industries are going towards cloud. It is very rarely 5 to 10% of the industry go to the public cloud unless until they have it. Most of them are still in private, and I can still limit the geographic boundary. But the only problem is when we go to the cloud vendor, they show me all the certificates. You want PCI DSS, you want HIPAA, you want ISO. See all the certificates in my website, download whenever you do. So that's the biggest challenge for us when we do a security risk assessment. And again, there are some gains also. So if I have a private cloud and I have a business of more than 50 million or 100 million, I can still go and audit the cloud. So we can do multiple due diligence factor, but again, it depends on your business size, what complexity you are coming in from, what regulations you are bound to, right? And even most of the regulators nowadays are also promoting cloud, but they have few constraints, and the right to audit is something like which I see that it is still a monopoly in cloud. We don't have right to audit, which is a big challenge for us still today.
But also there is a discussion happening. Should I do a risk assessment based, or is it data centric, or the risk centric, or is it based on a compliance centric? Because that perspectives are changing. Correct. So now coming back to Alok on the CASP side, okay. Do you think the industry, not even the business, even the security community, has started understanding the real sense of CASP and the related use cases? Because many a times when we speak to a CASP professional, they are all saying that I can help you understand the shadow IT. Okay, that whether I know or not, it's not going to make any difference. Everybody has shadow IT. Okay, so do you think that is correctly positioned?
I think, yeah, I mean, looking at the traction that we see in the market, absolutely yes. I think, again, going back to some of the analysts who are in the business of predicting how security is evolving around the world, they think the current penetration level is less than 15% of cloud security into enterprise, and they think it will grow to about 80% by 2020. That's like 2.5 years away, assuming they're talking about end of 2020. What we see in market is, I mean, there are simple use cases I can talk about, and you guys will relate to it, right? I access Office 365, the most widely used productivity application, from my mobile. I download a confidential file. This is my personal device. How do I prevent exfiltration of this confidential file, confidential enterprise file, from this unmanaged device? I want to do that. Office 365 is a productivity application. Microsoft is pushing me to go do that. I have done it, and now suddenly I'm staring at the problem because people have started using their Office 365 authentication credentials from their mobile phone, accessing the data. What do? I can't say don't access your emails from your mobiles. That's a huge productivity drain. So the use cases like this, where I want you to see the email, but I want to prevent you from downloading confidential files. I want to run email DLP on your unmanaged device. All kinds of stuff.
So one question over there. Sure. Actually, two questions. One is, at a counter argument, we can say I have a MAM, and I can put an Intune type of thing, which I'm going to control the endpoints, where the data should go. So that's one argument. So currently, is the CASB a luxury or a mandate?
So,
or a risk which needs to be addressed?
Containerization was a fad maybe 4 or 5 years ago. We could take a straw man poll. I don't think it is a hugely successful technology. Users like convenience, right? Anything that takes my convenience away, we sleep with these smartphones. We go to restrooms with these smartphones. If you make it inconvenient for me to use it, I'm not going to launch that container and look at my enterprise data only from the container. A lot of people don't do that. On top of that, the cloud applications, what they have started doing is, this is app-based, right? It's no longer browser-based. So as soon as people are used to using the app is something I cannot use from the container, people stop using the container. So CASB, I think the enterprises who are thinking CASB, the term aside, but if cloud security is being thought as a luxury, I think the enterprise itself is at risk, in my opinion.
No. Cloud security, the way I understand, everybody has their own interpretation. Okay. CASB, when you come as a particular solution, the question is, should we go and cry saying I need CASB today? Or I can wait and say that, okay, I need CASB somewhere in my roadmap.
Okay.
So based on your expertise on that.
Sure. I mean, you're a CISO, so you probably certainly know more than me. But
based on this thing, I have to decide tomorrow should I go and cry or.
Saying, are you comfortable? Are you comfortable not having visibility and any control over traffic that goes into unsanctioned cloud applications from unmanaged devices? That's happening in your organization, whether you like it or not, believe it or not, agree or not. It is happening. Every single customer that we have gone to and did what you call discovery earlier, of basically figuring out in that organization if there are business units who are using unsanctioned applications. Unsanctioned meaning something that IT does not know about. The average number of cloud applications, and we've been tracking this for 4 years now, that are in use in our customer base, which has grown from hundreds of companies to now thousands of companies, has grown 7-folds in 5 years. Average number of apps that are being used in an enterprise, right? So when you have so much of exfiltration of data because of unsanctioned apps, how can you not control the traffic?
I agree to that point. So I'm actually on the way writing an article on this. So two things I felt to be a very compelling reason. One is we need to govern the shadow IT. So CASB can help us on that. Second is a movement of data between two clouds, which doesn't touch your perimeter. This is the only way to do that. Okay. But the very part from the industry, if you actually look at, over the last many years' time, so many new technologies came. We heard, because 2 years back, if you go everywhere, people are talking APT. Okay. So BYOD was at some point. So it was all jargons came back and we loved it and invested on it. And end of the day, what I felt always, so much of hype in the industry is because nobody is getting it right. Okay, because startups are coming like anything, because there is opportunity to try new things based on the changes happening on that. But CASB surely, because from I have seen the way people present it is to be more compelling, surely on that. Any questions on from the audience, please?
So if I can just
Please,
add one thing. I think the disruption is huge. I think maybe there are parts of the industries which are in denial, but the disruption is huge. For example, how many of you know that hackers are no longer interested in sending a ransomware to your endpoint? There are now services that they run which provide the toolkit so that you and I can become that malware spreader. So I can actually, it's called ransomware as a service. You can buy ransomware and infect somebody, make some money in the process, goof off, right? That's what the disruption is. Now, if for these kinds of threats, right, where the hackers are themselves saying, I'm going to become a B2B player, right? As in, I'm going to become a business of providing threats so that you can use that threat and jeopardize somebody else's data or business. That's what is happening, and that's the level of threat. The cloud is a dangerous place and it is unstoppable. And if we don't secure it, wherever you guys are working, if we do not have security against, you use cloud applications. I can guarantee each one of you, knowingly or unknowingly, is using bunch of cloud applications. And if you do not have security, either at your endpoint or at your enterprise, I think that's a huge risk.
Thank you. Any questions from the audience? Thank you. Any closing comments, Riyaz, from your side?
Sure. So, I think it's important to, and again, going by what you said, it's like so many different types of threats that we see, and then things like CASB, which is again, I also personally believe it's very important to look at data sitting everywhere. I think the important thing that we need to focus on as a fraternity, as a security fraternity, is to make sure that how do we make sure that we equip ourselves to make sure that we as an industry are able to protect the trust in this digital age. Right? It's all about protecting the trust in the digital age. Everything is going to be digital, whether we like it or not. I mean, it's just a matter of time. We are already very digitized. It's just a matter of time where everything, 100% of it will be digitized. It's just a matter of time. It is important for us to look at security, very, very important. We all believe, I mean, I've seen security become a boardroom discussion nowadays, and it is important for us to make sure that we look at security when we do everything. Right from designing our networks, right from designing our applications, right from designing our cloud strategies, everywhere, I think security needs to be built in. The final note that I will say is, security is something that needs to be consumed fast and quick, and security needs to be automated, right? A lot of information at times is available, but unfortunately because of manual intervention, because security also depends on people and processes. It's also about people and process. While technology can evolve, is evolving as the cyber criminals, the biggest challenge where a lot of people would agree with me is still in people and process. Well, processes we can still define, but people still becomes a huge challenge. We have to focus on automation. Very soon we'll not face humans on the other side. We are going to face machines. There'll be machines sitting on the other hand who will be sort of like attacking you because somebody's written some program. Compute is available very cheap nowadays. There'll be machines coming at you, and the only way to compete with them is when you have the right automation in place. So
technology
I think
also need to mature.
Absolutely.
Rather than
Totally
silos,
agree.
it has to work at the
absolutely
holistic way.
And that's what I said. It's all about having that consistent security. It needs to be consistent across and correlated. That's my final comment.
Ganesh, your comments.
Yeah. So the way I see it is, we need to be strong in the fundamentals. So what I have observed in majority of the organizations in our experiences, if you see the attacks in the last 5-10 years, the fundamental standards are there, but from the people angle, a lot of controls have been not followed. So a lot of checklist driven tests are being done, but still some things are not effective. So the people angle, as he said, it is very important. And second thing, when we go with cloud and other examples and things like that, we have to be very clear what we are designing. Right now, I see we are hiring people for development, testing and other work, predominantly for their skill of programming language or the skill of their domain knowledge, whether they come from banking or insurance or whatever domain it is. But we are not hiring for people who are really good at security. So the awareness is one of the very key thing which we need to sensitize people. And again, when we do a security assessment, again, as you said, we never know whether there is a shadow IT or not. And right now they say that I don't manage any IT infra, everything is in cloud. So you ask the cloud vendor, right? So in that case, how we are going to do a due diligence for a cloud vendor? You have a lot of models and things like that. But still there also the fundamental remains the same, right? How do you do endpoint protection? How do you manage access management effectively? How do you review that? If you're in a multi-tenant environment, how do you review that? And do you have the capabilities when there is going to be an incident response, or if there is going to be a continuity scenario, how we are going to do it? So the fundamental still remains the same. But again, the environment is changing, challenges are coming up, and we have to be very smart enough where our important assets are there, where the data is stored, particularly both in rest and motion, CASB and other things what we discussed are very much essential. And again, I would also say that it will not be only for the business security, even regulations are also coming stricter and stricter in India and other countries also. Every industry is now regulated. And even if you are not regulated, the business, what you do with the regulated industry makes you regulated, right? So the challenges are coming up. But what I would say is we have to stick to the basics, which is very fundamentally important. And apart from it, we should look into multiple angles in security. And people angle is one of the very important angle, which I want to always say, right? In my closing comments. Yeah.
Thank you. Alok.
Yeah, I think the security is a business where I think, it is driven by the threat perceptions, right? I think you secure against a certain threat perspective. With the disruption that we talked about of virtualization of data center, distribution of data, unmanaged devices, I think suddenly the threat vectors have exponentially grown. Do we have a minute? I'll just give you a simple example, right? Since we talked about Office 365, your attachments are stored in OneDrive. In OneDrive, you can also share the files with some other users. Now, suddenly, your data, which is stored in cloud, is only as secure as the least security aware user you have shared your data with. And there have been instances, and it's called a fan-out effect, which is a user's file got infected, that user, same file was shared with several other people. The malware now goes from that injection, and instead of targeting files, it is targeting the users and the files of those users, because it's all in that shared medium of OneDrive. And now you can imagine how, because a file is shared by 10 users and every user has hundreds of files in that data store. So the speed at which threat can grow and permeate through your data has exponentially grown. So in multiple vectors, exponential growth in vectors, the speed at which a threat can grow, so those are all changing phenomenally. And hence, it's important to kind of think through, this is not an incremental evolutionary trend. It is a very, very disruptive trend. And thinking and designing for it, as co-panelists said, is extremely important. And I think it's never too late to go back and take a top-down view of where security is today in the organization, instead of just looking up firewall and up. And I think because of the disruption in the perimeter, that strategy is not fruitful or long-lasting.
And I've got one question. If Microsoft or Amazon or anybody do some changes on their features and create a visibility, do you think that independent CASBs will survive?
There is always a threat. Anytime there is an opportunity, people migrate to that opportunity, yes, there is a threat. Let me give you statistics. When we started, there were 1,200 cloud applications on the planet. Today there are 50,000 plus.
No, it is. Only thing is, what I'm saying is,
no, I'm saying,
the way disruption is happening,
you're asking. So
the OEMs are the major players are so aggressive, they will eat out everything out. That's
right.
why I was asking, from a business perspective, do you feel that as a risk at any point of time?
Yeah, we absolutely do. We are paranoid about risks to our business, to our company's existence. We are paranoid about it. So we do see that as a risk. And thankfully, it's easy to mitigate risk, because if Microsoft does a good job of providing security for Office 365, but you also use 1497 is the average number of cloud applications that are being used by a large organization today, based on five years of study. Now, what are those 1496 applications doing for their own security, and do you want to leave yourself vulnerable to each one of them securing against your use cases? So that's the problem, right? I think it's standardization.
Thanks for that. Any questions? Last questions before? Yes, sir. Nelson. The way I understand is that BYODs, because currently most of the securities are working based on personas. So in a normal organization, there will be around 7 to 10 personas created. So one of the persona will be there. The user is going to bring his own system, which is a non-corporate asset, connected to a corporate network, where the access to the data will be limited. In the sense, you will not have an access to download the files to your system, because the worry of a BYOD system getting in, to have adequate controls related to encryption, everything, is only if the corporate asset data is residing in your system. The current good thing is that there is a lot of technologies available, because 2 years back the scenario was different, based on the personas. Because earlier only one user ID. Now I as an individual has 3 personas on a day-to-day basis. Because in the morning when I go to the office, it's the office system, office network. At home, it is an office system, home network. My phone is my personal system, personal network. So there are 3 personas for me, and the way I access and process data changes based on that. Did I answer? Yeah. Yeah, they will also be wiped out. So as I, yes, sir. You cannot automate completely. So take an example, what we automate. I have 110 bots running inside, which is great micro hyper automations we have done with bots, which is running enterprise-wide in real time. The alerting based on that thing, everything is automated, because I have a fair confidence. What I cannot do in automation is that I don't want a trigger which is going back and doing a change in my control environment. I don't want to do it, because that can disrupt the office, the business. I will not allow that to automatically do a change. Okay. I will do anything. So if an antivirus is not updated, I will say automatically block the system or shut it down, or I can take a call. But otherwise I will not do it. More of notification, alerting is limited based on maturity and the confidence you build up. So one closing comment from my side is, we all as security professionals need to be very, very aware and sensitive to the changes which is happening around us. What we done 1 year back is not the right thing or adequate thing at this point of time when it comes to security, because changes are so much. I sit on few advisory boards where every time when I go there, I see this major companies itself changing their strategies. These are all large players based out of US. So last 6 months back, when what they said as their approach to do it is not the same what they are saying, because they are also changing based on the threat environment. For us to align and to safeguard this environment, we also need to be very much aligned to these changes. With that, thank you very much.